Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and look at how the entire waste management industry is undergoing a massive, multi-billion-dollar shift. We're talking about a complete transformation. What we used to just write off as garbage is now being recognized as a seriously valuable resource. To really grasp this, we have to completely reframe how we look at the everyday trash bin. It's not the end of the line anymore. For decades, the goal was simple, right? Make the trash disappear as cheaply as possible, which usually meant just burying it. But today, the most innovative companies are looking at those exact same landfills and seeing above-ground mines. Here's our roadmap for decoding these SASB sustainability accounting standards. First, we'll look at the circular economy shift. Then, expanding recycling and composting. Third is the waste-to-energy equation. Fourth, tackling electronic waste. And finally, the future of the industry. Section 1. The circular economy shift. So let's start with the changing landscape itself. This is being driven hard by customer demand and the rapidly rising costs of extracting virgin materials from the earth. And the foundation of this whole shift is this circular economy. It means moving away from just burying our trash and instead aggressively recovering materials to feed right back into the global supply chain. According to the SASB standards we're digging into today, waste management companies play a huge role here by separating and recovering reusable stuff, paper, glass, metal, and organics. Because honestly, without the infrastructure to actually recover these materials, the whole concept of a circular economy just falls apart. We're leaving behind that old linear extract, use, dispose model for a cradle-to-cradle approach of recover, recycle, reuse. That old linear model is just becoming way too expensive and environmentally taxing. So as the costs of virgin materials keep climbing, the economic incentive to recover, recycle, and reuse is literally skyrocketing. Now, what's really fascinating here is that these SSB metrics, specifically under the category IFWM 420A, act as the ultimate scorecard. Investors use them to measure exactly which companies are actually winning this circular economy race. Because it's not enough for a company to just put out a press release saying they're going green. No, they have to prove it with hard, quantifiable data on exactly how much material they're actively saving from the landfill. Section 2. Expanding recycling and composting. Let's look at how companies have to report on expanding everyday diversion methods. Like the bins sitting out in your driveway? This is where the rubber meets the road. To prove they're adapting, companies are required to report the exact weight in metric tons of materials they recycle, compost, or process as waste to energy. This specific metric, IFWM 420A3, is entirely about volume. Whether we're talking about solid materials or hazardous materials being reused as an ingredient in some industrial process, the standard demands precise tracking. And it goes deeper. Metric IFWM 42A.2 requires companies to track the percentage of their different customer types that actually receive these recycling and composting services. We're talking everyone from direct residential contracts to massive industrial clients. And here's a kind of wild technical detail from the guidelines. Say you're a residential customer, but your recycling is serviced through a contract with your city. The waste company actually categorizes you as a municipal customer, not residential. The residential tag is strictly reserved for direct contracts. It's exactly this level of standardized accounting that lets investors compare apples to apples across the entire industry. Also, it's really crucial to note how SASB defines composting. It strictly requires controlled biological decomposition. That specifically excludes just the natural, uncontrolled decay of organic solid waste. You can't just let a giant pile of leaves rot in an empty field and call it commercial composting. The standard requires the material to actually be sanitized through the generation of heat and stabilize so it genuinely benefits plant growth. It's a highly engineered industrial process. Section 3. The waste-to-energy equation. So obviously not everything can be recycled or composted, right? And that brings us to the role of waste-to-energy, or WTE, in diverting non-recyclable waste. The standard defines WTE as a very specific process of converting that non-recyclable waste into usable heat, electricity, or fuel to power our homes. And to be clear, this is not just throwing a bunch of trash into a fire. It involves highly advanced processes. Think combustion, gasification, pyrolyzation, and anaerobic digestion. It's essentially a way to squeeze the absolute last drop of utility out of materials that would otherwise just sit in a hole in the ground. The key point here is accountability. Companies can't just cheat the system by burning trash to make it disappear. Under metric IFWM 420A1, they must explicitly report the percentage of that incinerated waste that was actually used for energy recovery. They also have to break down exactly how much of that incinerated waste was hazardous. Energy recovery means they're actively capturing the heat from incineration and turning it into something productive. There's a super interesting nuance in these accounting rules too. Generally, waste to energy is kept completely separate from the recycling category. But there is one major exception. Residuals from anaerobic digestion can actually count as recycled, but only if they are used productively, like being turned into compost or fertilizer instead of just being sent to a landfill. It just goes to show how incredibly detailed these frameworks are to ensure companies maximize resource recovery at literally every single step.
Section 4. Tackling electronic waste.
Let's shift gears to a highly specific, rapidly growing, and honestly incredibly valuable waste stream: e-waste. The standard defines electronic waste very clearly. It encompasses everything from old stereos and office copiers to those discarded cell phones sitting in your desk drawer right now. E-waste is this massive challenge, but it's also a huge opportunity. These devices are absolutely packed with precious metals like gold, silver, and copper. In fact, mining these metals from old electronics is often way more efficient than trying to mine them fresh from the earth. And companies are held strictly accountable here. Under metric IF-WM 420A.4, they have to report not just the metric tons of e-waste they collect, but the precise percentage of valuable materials they actually recovered from it through recycling. It's one thing to collect a ton of old computers. It is an entirely different ballgame to have the advanced tech infrastructure needed to safely break them down, extract the raw materials, and feed them back into the supply chain as a substitute for feedstock. This metric is what shows investors which companies actually have that capability. Section 5. The future of waste. So let's pull all these metrics together and look at the broader implications for the future of this industry. The big takeaway here: shifting away from traditional landfills is no longer just some environmental mandate. It is a completely critical business strategy for capturing new revenue and building out a sustainable circular economy. The SASB standards make it crystal clear. The companies that provide robust recycling, composting, and waste-to-energy services are the ones that are going to meet changing consumer demands. They're the ones dodging the rising costs of virgin materials, and ultimately, they are positioning themselves for major revenue growth while shrinking their environmental footprint. As this explainer shows, the very definition of waste is changing forever. That old extract, use, dispose model is on its way out, being replaced by a complex, highly data-driven system of resource recovery. It really leaves you wondering, when you look at your own daily habits, just how much hidden treasure we're unknowingly throwing away every single day. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive into the numbers driving the circular economy.